I was talking about navigating the institution of education. Yeah, it's like swimming upstream. There it just isn't enough investment. So recently, as we found out, the budget for the Student Success Act has been cut in half.
That I think schools have a responsibility to make sure every learner is affirmed and, to not harm them, because I think that's more what we see because of the invisibility, because of just the ignorance that people have about the Pacific, the kind of not caring of, diverse groups. And actually, as human beings, I think we all have an ethical responsibility to understand each other.
If we look at the different spaces within the Western education system, there's a long history there, the lack of representation of materials and curriculum that teach about the Pacific as a place, but then there's also the lack of representation of Pacific Islander staff and faculty.
A student never moves on their own. It's all the people who have come before them and everybody who's behind them and all the shoulders they stand on. And I think that's what makes the work that we do so different, of understanding that, having that indigenous lens, and now having to implement that into our students. Aloha mai kākou, and welcome back to KOKO Podcast. This is our episode number 5 right here at KALO's Aloha Resource and Community Center. Today we are so excited to welcome our featured guests from across Oregon, talking about our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Student Success Plan and how we're supporting our Pacific Islander students across the state. So we are so excited to have them. Each of them have made their way here to our center, and we are always appreciative of being in space with all of them. So I'm going to hand it over to each of them to introduce themselves and share a little bit about who they are, their background, and what they do for our community. So I'll lean to my right. I'll hand it over to Dr. Galeai, and she can introduce herself.
Talofa, hello everyone. My name is Jacinta. I'm the Executive Director of Samoa Pacific Development Corporation, and we serve Samoans and Pacific Islanders here in the state of Oregon, and still a very new organization in that work, and glad to be
here. Yeah. All right. Malo Lele, my name is Patricia Fifita. I am an assistant professor teaching Pacific Island Studies at Oregon State University in the Indigenous Studies program. Relatively new position. I think I'm going on my fifth year. And it's been an exciting ride. I'm very excited to be here in conversation with everyone and talk about some of our challenges, but also a lot of the really wonderful and exciting things that are happening in Oregon for our Pacific communities.
Hello.
Aloha, I'm Lana Lopesi. I like to say I'm the University of Oregon Patricia Fifita. So I'm also an assistant professor in the Department of Indigenous Race and Ethnic Studies.
Beautiful. Mahalo to each of you for being here today. Again, I'm excited. It's like a fangirl moment to have all of you folks. And I was like, oh my gosh, can I imagine if I had Alicia here and all of you? The world. You folks are truly who inspire the work here at KALO, and so we so mahalo each of you folks. I think one of the things I would love to just kind of talk story with first is why is it important for you folks to be here in Oregon? What is it that you folks see the need, specifically for our Pacific Islander students and their families, right? Because we're so grounded in that ohana, that family. So what do you folks, what is the need to be here? I know all of us are transplants here in Oregon. So if you folks, whoever would like to start to share.
Well, I've been here for about 10 years, and I came here out of a lot of us, which is family, right? One person moves here and then another person. So I ended up here because of my parents. And so, I've been here for that long, for about 10 years. Why are we here? Well, our people live here, right? And like in many states and many cities, many of our people are invisible. And so I'd like to think of myself as part of the leadership that helps to build a network to help our people empower themselves and access resources and whatnot, whether it be in schools, in communities, in the workforce and whatnot.
Well, I guess I'll add similarly. I'm here in Oregon because of my family. I was born and raised in Oregon as a child, living, and I guess of the diaspora. So my parents came from Tonga and settled here in Oregon in the late 1970s. And we didn't necessarily know that this would be where we would settle and, you know, our family would grow and, you know, where we would be based. But it became our home. And similarly, we were quite invisible and quite isolated. But we were living our lives here and needed to build our lives here. And so I think, you know, for me, reflecting back about, you know, that whole experience growing up here, leaving and then now returning as an adult with different types of responsibilities, I think it's been really important for me to kind of walk through certain spaces, witness and experience challenges, and then return with that perspective. I think that's a lot of what's kind of motivated me and helped guide me in sort of the work that I'd like to do for my community to help empower my community, because I understand the challenges I experience, and I understand the challenges that my community's facing, but then also the next generation, my own child and my siblings' children. Living in the diaspora, just navigating that alone is difficult. Finding ways to feel grounded in your cultural identity and who you are, it's difficult to do that on your own, and it takes a community, I think, to really help folks feel that they can live and thrive and be well in spaces that don't necessarily support who they are, or even understand or care about who we are. So I think that's what I feel most motivated by today's being in Oregon, besides my family. I mean, I did return back because my parents are aging, and that's another reality too. The personal responsibility I have to my family is to care for my parents, and they happen to be here. But living here, it's the same challenge. When I was growing up here, is like, how do we navigate these spaces? How do we stay well? But now in leadership roles, how do I really address the responsibility I have to open spaces and create spaces to support my community? Yeah.
I guess my story is slightly different in that I'm new. Well, in my mind, I'm still new, but this is the start of year 4 in Oregon, which has gone pretty quick too. So I'm born and raised in Auckland, New Zealand. So I'm a daughter of the diaspora too, but it's a completely different ball game out there. So I came for a work opportunity. I took a role at the University of Oregon as a Pacific Studies professor within ethnic studies. And that was just a decision that I made for myself. And I brought my husband and 2 kids, and we were like, what is this place? It's like unlike anything we've seen before. Where are our people? Like, what on earth is this? And so I never kind of saw myself in terms of like stepping into a leadership role. Of course, the kind of jobs that we have in academia come with responsibility. But now that I'm here, I'm just like, oh my gosh, because I know there can be something else, because that's what I was raised in. I feel like I feel this huge kind of debt to the students that do come to the University of Oregon. And there's not a lot of us, and it's a particular kind of student that will end up in one of my classrooms, but once they're there, I know that it's kind of my job to take them under my wing, but also being plugged into, folks like you all through the kind of various work that we do. I think that's where the responsibility comes. It's like, because we're all so spread out, we're like these chocolate chips across the state that we sort of act in isolation a lot of the times, but when we have these moments to come together and sort of get aligned, then we can sort of see the ways in which statewide there's all this really exciting stuff happening that we can plug into to kind of strengthen the work that we do as, you know, I suppose leaders in the space, but also just out of the responsibilities that we have to our communities.
For sure. Beautiful. Oh, my heart is like racing sitting over here with you guys. Like, wow, they're such amazing people. You guys are so amazing. And so, you know, now being here, and I think similar to what Lana was saying is that, like, you know, and but similar to what you folks said, I came here for family as well. You know, having my mom decide to move to Oregon, of all the places, but having grown up in Hawaii and seeing the challenges of being in Hawaii, and you know the economic pain that I had to witness, you know, as growing up, and so it was very, my mom making the decision to move up here was hard for me too, because it was like, it was almost as if I was losing a connection to home, and so that was the hard part. And so being here in Oregon, having felt that, I think that's where I center my work in. It's like making sure that nobody ever has to feel like they cannot return home. Like that they have no sense of place there. And I think one of the things that our students feel a lot, especially if they are born here and raised here, is that lack of connection to our Pacific period, to the Pacific Ocean, to all of our history, because here that is absolutely invisible. We're not seen in the books, we're not seen in schools. You know, my sister, we're 18 years apart. She went to school here. I grew up where I went to like 8 different elementary schools. She grew up where she went, the same people she went to preschool, she graduated in high school with, which is sometimes it's hard to find in Hawaii. And so, but what was fortunate for her was that she grew up with us, and she grew up in hala. One of the first things I leaned on was I needed halau here. I needed hula. I needed something that grounded me so that I didn't lose identity. But that's not the same narrative for everybody that's growing up here. And so, what is it that you folks see in the education system here that is, one, challenging for our students, and then 2, if maybe you folks can share what you folks are doing to bring resolution to that, to bring, you know, a pathway for our students to have a cultural identity, a cultural connection to home through your folks' work.
Yeah, I like to think of the metaphor of swimming upstream against the current is perhaps one way to describe my experience navigating the education system here in the United States, you know, specifically Oregon. So what we're doing in our organization is we have a tutoring and mentoring program for the high school at Roosevelt High School to just, first of all, learn about the student experience here, and then learn about the community that they come from, and to figure out ways to support them and let them know that we're actually here to help them navigate their own journey through academia. And even our program, you know, which is an after-school program, so we're not part of their everyday classes, and that's really hard because we have to find time to meet with them, whether it's through lunch or after school. So that's another added challenge for our program. So yeah, so just opportunities to let students know that they're not alone.
I think one of the probably the most overwhelming issues for me when I think about it is just the incredible lack of representation of Pacific Islander everything in the school system. So we've been talking about invisibility, and if we look at the different spaces within the Western education system, you know, there's a long history there, the lack of representation of materials and curriculum that teach about the Pacific as a place, but then there's also the lack of representation of Pacific Islander staff and faculty, and then if we go down to the student level and in the worlds that they live in and that they occupy within the system, there's a lack of representation of other Pacific Islander students that can be difficult for young people who are trying to, grow their identities and find a sense of belonging in a space that, obviously is not catering to them. And so I think in general, that overall lack of representation will be a constant challenge at all levels. And I think all of us are doing different type of work to address that in different ways, which I think is really key. And also important that we collaborate, because I think we have to be really holistic in the way that we address the issues that we face, because it's so systemic. So I think that I feel privileged and really excited too that we have opportunities to work with folks like you and Lana and I working together, although it's just a piece of the issue, but looking at curriculum specifically, being able to call out and address those issues, have real critical conversations with the state, with the Department of Education about the lack of the inequities there in representation, I think is really important, and then to do something, on a practical level, like develop the curriculum. And that's something that we'll be working on over the next few years. So that's really important to me. I still feel like there's all these lingering issues too, and just thinking about like our little people that are in the school system trying to navigate that. Their sense of belonging, I think, is really, 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 really critical. And so that's another kind of layer that and a challenge that I'm constantly trying to think about, is how do you cultivate that, and maybe we could talk more about that, but there's various types of challenge, but it's a really overarching issue around representation for sure.
There's so many parts to it. I mean, like structurally, the issue is so significant. Because, as you say, there is not enough representation at any level. So we don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough on the student affairs side, so people end up doing all of these things that are beyond our jobs, beyond our expertise, and we get called in and people do say yes out of, feelings of duty and responsibility when maybe we're not the best people to be doing these things. But the issues are so structural that, everything is just a Band-Aid at that given time, yet our students are in there right now. And it is a Western education system. We live in a Western world. That is just the fact. So do we really want the school to be in charge of belonging, right, of cultural identity, of kind of shaping and affirming that when everything we have is just a Band-Aid and is just dependent on who happens to be in what school at what time? So I think, the kind of point that you made about your own cultural identity is so key, that I think schools have a responsibility to make sure every learner is affirmed and, to not harm them, because I think that's more what we see because of the invisibility, because of just the ignorance that people have about the Pacific, the kind of not caring of, diverse groups. And actually, as human beings, I think we all have an ethical responsibility to understand each other. Right, and so that includes all teachers to know who's in the classroom. But I mean, I'm not going to trust an elementary level PI club. It will most likely be an API club to shape my daughter's sense of self, And so I think this is also a part of the structural thing, is that a school is just one piece of all of these other issues. If a family cannot eat, if they do not have secure housing, then the kind of shaping the cultural identity is just going to be the last part. Like maybe the language speakers don't want to speak language in the household because they're actually dealing with like really real stuff, and so I think we look to education a lot to fill these gaps, but that's why organizations beyond the schools are so important too, because it's just so amorphous what's happening. And I think we are all doing these projects that are really important, but there's other things going on. Like it's a national issue that affects every aspect of a Pacific Islander's life, and we just get them in this moment of school. And sometimes that's enough to say, you know, to help one student. That kind of sets them on the trajectory, and that's great. But I think we also have to acknowledge the burden that puts on those individuals that have those moments with these students as well. And so how do we plug education into these other conversations that exist? And, you know, it's sort of, it gets hard because then you start just unpacking like the really big issues that exist, which kind of takes away from the really great work that everyone does. But I think we're remiss to not kind of acknowledge that it's just one piece of something much bigger.
Beautiful. It leads me in. It's a perfect pathway into our next conversation. And so, for many of us, we have come into space for us through the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, through our work we did with Oregon. But one of the things that unites all of our organization and our work is the Oregon's the passing of the Student Success Plan for the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. And so, speaking to what we were all speaking to, right? I think I want to lean on what Lana was saying here is that one of the things that we really focused on, and we're very fortunate to have Auntie Jacinta here, who was part of that, the creation of the Student Success Plan, is that it was more about incorporating the families. It was more about really putting the values of Pacific Islanders in, and just for Hawaii we call it Lavena Hawaii, like just the being of being Hawaii. And what that encompasses everything, right? It encompasses how we live, our family, the way that all the meals that we share, all of those things. And so I think the Student Success Plan, I was excited about that, to see that all of that being incorporated. And so I guess we'll start to dive into the Student Success Plan. And, you know, I know you folks are sharing your programs, but how does our Student Success Plan, how is it currently are there challenges that we're seeing? What kind of impacts is it making? Are there things that we would hope that that could change? Are there, you know, and this could be a difficult conversation. We all experience our own feelings about this. But if we could share with our community what the Student Success Plan was meant to be, what would you share? How would you explain the Student Success Plan to them?
I would say that it was an acknowledgement at the state level, because it is official legislation that recognizes us as people here in the state of Oregon. You know, in addition to the work that the indigenous people community has done, the African Americans, the Hispanic community, we're also part of that space now. And I think because it's so new, you know, it's almost like it just started yesterday. So it's really hard to talk about it. But, you know, to me, first and foremost, it is the acknowledgement by the Department of Education and the state of Oregon that we exist. And it's, you know, it's a dream, right? At the dream level, you can say, oh, it's supposed to do all these kinds of things to support our students so that they can thrive, right, in the academic school system here in Oregon. But, you know, the dream and the reality, they're two different things, as we are experiencing now with the budget cuts. So I'll leave it at that for now and let my colleagues add to it.
Well, I agree. It's on a policy and a legislative level, it's so important. Like, this is a historic moment, and it's opening pathways for change. And even though the road is uncertain and the resources are not guaranteed, I think we're making a really important, powerful statement, not only for Oregon, but for the rest of the country, in that we're centering Pacific Islander students' success, well-being, in the various ways that it's defined through the Student Success Plan, the various ways that we define the needs of our students within our own communities. It's a really important step, and it's really exciting, and I think, you know, we need to take advantage of this moment, do everything we can to push it somewhere where we hope it can go. I think what's really exciting about it too is that it disaggregates the Asian Pacific Islander umbrella term.
So important.
And that often, you know, just further marginalizes and makes invisible Pacific Islander needs, challenges, and the statistics within the education system specifically. I think that's really key as well. And so, you know, I'm so grateful for all of the advocacy that led up to it. And like the Student Success Plan is new, but the work leading up to it is not new. And it's part of a really big collective effort to support students, our children, and our Pacific kids. And so I think it's really exciting. But we're going to have to maintain the momentum and keep holding people to task to make it, you know, to take full advantage of this moment. Yeah.
I mean, I think you both covered it, but I would just say, as someone who has not been here as long and is, you know, new-ish, and a beneficiary of that advocacy work, I think it also speaks to this history of Pacific organizing in this state that we don't really see or you don't hear about until you're here. And I'm like, oh my gosh, y'all are incredible. Wait, you have what? You know, and it's so exciting to hear and learn about that. And I don't know if people kind of see Oregon as that kind of place or Islanders here as kind of doing that work, but I think, you know, that's something that we don't acknowledge much, but it's so exciting. And, you know, I'm so grateful to, you know, be able to now be a part of that work and help kind of share that workload.
I mean, that's something that Elena, what Lana was saying too, is that's what's, I think, is so powerful about collaboration and coalition work. You know, in Hawaii spaces, I'm often sharing about Oregon all the time. You know, because even if for Hawaii, we don't even have a student success plan that creates a pathway to support our students. You know, I get invited very often, even from Oregon, to go into the school systems to teach about Hawaiian history or Hawaiian culture, which is interesting to be doing that in Hawaii. For me, it is interesting because I come from a Hawaiian immersion school, so Hawaiian history and culture is so it's visible beyond, like, we are living it every day. But to go and have to teach students about, like, the land that they're living on, you know, I can tell you, like, the amount of kids that don't even they haven't even been to Iolani Palace, or we just had our summer camp, and the amount of families, Hawaii families, who, you know, I was so excited to be with the teenagers, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, Iolani Palace, and they were like, what's Iolani Palace? And I was just like, what do you mean, what is Iolani Palace? Like, how are we not, you know, so even in Hawaii, we don't have that infused into the work that needs to be teaching our own kids about the places. And so to see that happening here, I share about Oregon's coalition and collaborative work all the time. And I think if more of us are able to share that and continue to contribute that into spaces, they see the importance of, it's so much more valuable when we're working together versus working on our own. And I think that's what I love about the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, and a lot of KALOHCC's success comes from working with our Pacific Islander organizations and seeing how they moved and how they navigate, so that we can do that in these spaces. And just the other day I was talking to Utah, because, you know, that state, I mean, they have 8 elected officials who are Pacific Islanders and 11 on the ticket for the next, it's in just what they do, but to see how they collaborate and how they really give space. In my head, I'm almost like, oh, I should move to Utah. That's not what I want to do, but because they give so much visibility to their Pacific Islander students. I knew about one Mana Academy, but I didn't know that they had 2 Pacific Islander focused schools. You know, and I was like, oh gosh, that's the dream for Oregon. Imagine having a school. And I think we talk about this often. And because I think what the education, just systems forget, is that a student never moves on their own. It's all the people who have come before them and everybody who's behind them and all the shoulders they stand on. And I think that's what makes the work that we do so different, of understanding that, having that indigenous lens, and now having to implement that into our students. Our challenges that we're seeing with the Student Success Plan, and yeah, so we can just share what we're thinking, and outside of the budget a set of budgets, or you can share the budget cuts, whatever you folks would like to share about what we see is part of our challenges that we're faced with the student success plan.
Well, I would say the student success plan, at least for SBDC, is a program just like one of our many that we have to secure funding for. And because this is really new, we're at the mercy of what happens at the legislature. So recently, as we found out, the budget for the Student Success Act has been cut in half. So that's a challenge, right? And as of now, it is early August, and we still don't know, right? They haven't told us what the allocation is. So what do we do, right? Do we stop the work? Do we find other resources to continue the work? So that's just reality right now, right? On top of many other things in terms of our actual plans that we have in the Student Success Act.
Yeah. I think it can be challenging to feel like, okay, all of these resources are available now, but it's really still, there's a lot of uncertainty about the actual allocation, availability of funds. This is something that was experienced personally with our program and our grant, but still needing to be ready. There's also the part of like needing to rally our community around this new potential programming, and not that it's misleading to say like, okay, we have these resources available, because there are new and growing resources, but not being able to have that certainty is really hard to communicate that reality to our community folks that we're wanting to engage with the programming that we're doing. And we want the programming to be sustainable. We want it to be successful, but I think that can be really challenging. So like setting a course that's realistic, how do we engage folks in a meaningful way, but then also prepare them for the realities that there's a lot of uncertainty. So that to me has just been hard for me to wrap my head around. Be like, how do I really sit in this space where it seems like we have a lot of really great things going, but it's still, some things are kind of out of reach. And then now we're being told that it's being cut in half, and we don't know what they're going to say to us next year too, if we're going to try to learn from what's just happened. So it's a really tricky path, and it's hard not to feel discouraged, because that's kind of how our path tends to often be, is a bit precarious. And so it's like, in one way I want to say like, oh, we're used to it, but at the same time it's like how it's a heavy burden nonetheless. And how do we recharge our batteries, the energy, the folks that are doing the community work, to maintain to stay positive around all of this uncertainty. So yeah, I think I'm still trying to get better at how to navigate that space, because I feel a heightened responsibility when you're doing community work to be able to be transparent and honest with the folks that we're engaging with, and that we need their support. So it's just a challenging space. I don't have all the answers, but yeah, and do it anyways. But
it's hard to, exactly. So I was just gonna lean in on that, like, Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, I mean, for years we did it because it needed to get done, right? And I think that's such a it's a part of us. Like, we're gonna do this work, and we're gonna make sure it happens, because we're not gonna just, this is so important, not just for ourselves but for the next generation. And I think that's something that Pacific Islanders, we often, I don't know if that's that's the burden part, but it's something that is just part of us, that we're gonna do this work. You're either gonna support us or we're gonna move forward. And I think we have to call it to the state, and this is why I lean in. Like, the state has to now start recognizing, for I don't know how many years was our Pacific Islander communities already doing this work for free.
Right.
That's just calling it out, like, for free, giving our time, and that's not being valued. And so it is so uncertain to be in this space of like, are we back to that? Like, we're building up our programs, And every step of the way, whoever we're speaking to, we have to be like, oh, but sorry, we don't know if we can do this, but we're just going to keep going. And then if we cannot, we'll let you know.
Right.
And what does that put on our students and the kids like that we have to work with? Like, just creating another conversation. But anyway, so I just wanted to lean on that. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but
No, I think just because we are a resilient community doesn't mean we should not be resourced for success.
Yeah.
If we had to set these outcomes and the resources have now been halved, then the outcomes also need to be halved, right? That it just has to track in the same way. So I think there's that side of it where it's like, we can do it, we will do it, people will do it, but we shouldn't have to, right? And I think that needs to be acknowledged, the burden that kind of financial shift is creating, and understanding about, shifting that. The other side of it is like, it's another burden, not financial, but it's on our labor as people. We all already have full-time jobs. When I hit Patricia up, it was like this time, whatever year it was, where we were grant writing, I was like, what do you think? I know we're both trying to like get tenure, which is like not an easy thing, but should we take on this extra, bit of work? We did that, as did every other organization that applied to take on something additional. It didn't mean that a part of our work all of a sudden disappeared to bring this in. So I think that's the other side of it too. There is this incredible community who's taking this on, and sometimes I don't know if that's really acknowledged. Like, again, it's like, oh, but here's these resources and be grateful. Look at what you can do now. And it's like, well, already I think a fully well-resourced plan would be the bare minimum, because the structural issues are so profound that everything would make a significant impact, but that's scalable to the time, right? Like the kind of century of whatever that is being reversed. And so when that just keeps getting pulled back, I think we have to be realistic about what we are able to see from this in 10 years' time. And that's just going to be what it is. But, let's not put more burden on the people that have already taken this work on, and then make us feel like failures if we're only able to do the best that we can do, right? We need to kind of give that spirit of aloha to each other in the things that we take on in this really kind of constrained moment. And I have no doubt there'll be incredible things that come from it, but people will be burnt out in the process.
Oh yeah.
And how do we feel about that? How are we caring for each other in that? And what is the accountability that is being taken by folks who have kind of set up this structure for us to work within?
Yeah, it's really interesting because 5 minutes ago we were talking about the excitement of the Student Success Act, which we believe it's the first of its kind in the country. California doesn't have one, Hawaii, Washington, Utah, which in my mind, that's where a lot of this should have happened right first at the state level. And now we're pulling back a little bit. But I agree, wanted to add to what Lana was saying about taking care of ourselves and working smarter. We are going to continue to do the work, but we do have to be smart about how much we're going to do, while at the same time hold the state and the Department of Education accountable, right, to what they're responsible for in terms of supporting and funding the Student Success Act. But I also want to add, just like at a high level, just in this country alone, right, how much they don't value education, right? If you just look at the state budgets, the federal budget, right, just a small portion of it goes to education. So what does that say, right? So it always impacts us at the community level. At the end of the day, it impacts the students and their family. But, I was talking about navigating the institution of education. Yeah, it's like swimming upstream. It just isn't enough investment in this country. And yet it is the richest country, as far as we know right now. It keeps changing. in the world, right?
Yep.
Why can't they invest more in their people if they want to, thrive economically and culturally and socially? So yeah, it's a interesting concept or reality that we live in, and navigating everything in this country.
And it's a choice,
Yeah.
right? It's not that people can't, it's that people choose to
Right.
invest in other places. And I think, like you say, like I can like complain for a really long time, but then like you said earlier too, our babies are in school right now, right? And the student that turns up into your classroom is there in that moment. And so then you do what you need to do to support them through. And so it's just like, it's a catch-22. It's like, we know that there are things that need to change, and yet here we are doing the things, every day.
So we navigate the challenges. We're trying to stay resilient within this community, within this system. Who sometimes we just often feel like we're always having to battle. But I do want to talk about the successes, or maybe the things that make it worth being. Even though the excitement of us having the student success plan is so awesome. I don't know if each of you would be willing to share like a story about one of your students, or something that continues to fuel your work, like of a student that is, like for me it's seeing my students in the school systems when I get to go to their schools and teaching what they've learned outside of the school, being able to see them empowered enough to know that they're grounded enough to say, no, that's not Hawaii, that's not Hawaiian, but this is, and knowing that like even though they can recognize something that's wrong, they come with a resolution. They come offering an opportunity to educate and an opportunity to impact that change. And so I don't know if there's stories that you folks can change, that you folks have seen here in Oregon that gives us hope, and gives the families that get to hear this story hope that our student success plan, the work that we're doing as a community, is making a change. One keiki, one student, one family at a time.
Yeah, I think about 2 of my staff members. They are products of the Portland school system. They obviously navigated it by themselves, and they made it to college and they graduated.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And now one of them works for us, another one actually works for the state. So, I'm just kind of thinking through about what their journey was like, and what kind of decisions that they made to put themselves in that trajectory, and what kind of support that their parents gave them to make sure that they stayed on that trajectory. Just recently at Roosevelt High School, one of our students, who is Tongan, was one of the valedictorians.
Beautiful.
So they made it, right? These are examples, but they are examples of families who are very intentional, and students who just stay the course and just manage to make their way through this chaotic system.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I've been so inspired by so many of my students at OSU, and so in that space in higher education, I think in my position too, teaching Pacific Island Studies, a lot of my students, especially the Pacific Islander students, so I say all of the students, there's a total lack of any type of education about the Pacific history, geography, literature. I think I've talked about how it's like ground zero. We're building from the ground up. And so I feel like that class alone, I've seen the impact in just teaching a little bit about the Pacific, especially to my Pacific students. I think for some of them, it's been life-changing for them to feel a sense of connection to their history, but also a sense of empowerment in who they are, and that kind of the alignment of their identity within an academic space, I think has been really important. There was a student who, I think they were a biomed major, and they grew up in Oregon. they were Chamorro. And they said, I'd never really been connected to that. My culture, I don't really know anything about it. I've been to Guam, but I don't really know anything about it. And, it's just kind of something my dad talks about at home every once in a while. And through the course of the class, the students had the opportunity to do like a creative project. And at the end of the class, the student decided to write a poem about their trip to Guam, and we're able to really explore through some of the historical stuff we went through and just reflecting on the different things we had learned in the class. But for them, it changed the trajectory of their path, where they felt so much more centered in who they were, and that was everything to me. So just that potential to connect somebody to that and empower them and be able to value themselves in this space. And so I often tell my students, because this is something that I had to live by too, trying to get through graduate school, is that understanding that the educational space as an institution is not built for us. I kind of look at it as the structural space with walls and beams that are built. It's a structure, and it's not meant to nurture us. We have to find ways to feel nurtured and build a sense of belonging within those spaces. And so that's something that I try to share with my students, that you have to find a way to cultivate that sense of yourself and find community, so that as you navigate, this can be a really lonely space, but it also can be, it's a cold space, and it's also, again, not built to nurture you. So that's something that I usually share with my students. And not to take up too much more time, but one more story, and this is different. This is outside of the higher education space. I had a powerful experience with my son entering kindergarten this year, and he had long hair down to past his waist, and he early on in the school year he was getting bullied for his long hair, and I was just crushed. I was like, oh no, this is horrible. My little baby is feeling like unsafe and unvalued, and so I wasn't sure how to approach it besides being like Mama Bear. I got really upset, but then I was like, oh yeah, I am an ethnic studies teacher. I do have some tools, and it was a really important moment for me to understand how I can build a relationship with the school, with this teacher, with this principal, potentially with the school district, to support them with learning tools and suggestions and ideas, and writing a letter to the principal, writing a letter to his teacher, offering to share resources, books. We had a really great moment of sharing and understanding, and then the principal was like, we're going to order these books for our library, books about long hair and the value of the strength of hair and in different cultures, and so that was a really powerful moment for me, and important for me to see that as a not only as an educator but as families, we can show up for our little ones. And my sister, through the process, was reminding me, she's like, we just need to show up. We just need to let the teachers know that we care about our little ones, and we're going to hold folks accountable. And that was another element, too, that reminded me how critical it is for our families to be involved and engaged in our young ones as they navigate these educational spaces as well. So, to remind the little ones, but also the folks that are teaching them that they need to be valued and looked after. So,
Thank you for
I
sharing.
know, thank you.
Do I have to go? I think I am only in my job because of the students. I think that's because with academic careers too, folks that stay at school long enough and then eventually someone gives you a job, you're on a particular kind of pathway that's about your research and whatever kind of it is that you produce. And so teaching is always this thing that you do, but it's never actually held in high regard, at least while you're going through your PhD. And so it sort of has this stigma to it, in that it kind of comes second to the research, and then the service that you do is even lesser. But I think as a Pacific person, all of those roles kind of get flipped. Like the service sort of takes on the most, I suppose, emphasis, and then everything else. And And so I kind of didn't know what I was getting myself into. And then it's the one student, right? It's like the one comment. It's now I've been there long enough where I have had the freshmen that came in and were doing all sorts of different kind of majors and had these visions for their lives, and then their path just completely changes. And you see them at graduation, they're so confident and proud in who they are. And I think, you know, the interesting thing with college level too is that people are coming from all over. But I do think the Oregon students are different, you know, and it's, you know, large Micronesian communities too. And so I also had a Chamorro student who came in and had always wanted to kind of learn language, and then did Intro to Pacific Studies, and sort of, he just kind of became a different person, you know, not because of me, but I think just there was like a moment, and then he sort of did his thing, and by the end of his graduating year, he was conversational in Chamorro, you know, and that was his own kind of independent learning. And so I think it's those moments. It's like writing the reference letter for someone who gets a job working for the tribal community, you know.
I cry all the time, I'm sorry.
No, but I think it is those moments where you're like, oh, that's why I'm here, or that's why I'm persevering through this department meeting that I don't care about, you know. It's because of that student. And I think the work that Patricia and I have been able to do with the Student Success Plan is also bringing our students together. And I get so jealous of Oregon State, and I know I shouldn't say that, you know, because we have this kind of rivalry that we're supposed to uphold, but the truth is, like, we need each other. And so, you know, we've done a lot of work together, crossing those rival lines, and also seeing the ways in which our students are able to work together and kind of what they're able to build. And you know, some of the kind of senior students now are supporting our students as they're developing their Pacific clubs. And so it's all of that stuff, you know, that really has in some ways nothing to do with you, but at the same time, if you weren't there, maybe that one connection, you know, wouldn't have created whatever is to come, you know. And I think it's so exciting to think, like, in 20 years time, I'm so curious to see where everyone will go, you know. And it's because too, I think about the people that were there for me, that one person who probably doesn't even know that they were instrumental, you know. And so sometimes I think we just have to be in a space to do that. And then I've just come back from our University of Oregon's first ever study abroad class in Samoa, which was not something I ever thought would happen.
I was living through all her photos. I was like, what is happening? That is beautiful. It was beautiful.
But I had just, like, personally the best time, and then to share that with students, I think, was so incredible. And you know, the learning is just so polar opposite to what is possible in a classroom in Oregon. And so I think it's a really great reminder that there are these other things we can do, you know. And the other thing too is we work in predominantly white spaces. So I teach Pacific Studies to predominantly white classrooms. It might be that the students of color make up the majority, but the Pacific Islanders certainly do not. And a lot of times people underestimate the kind of buying power or the interest that is there for Pacific stuff. And we're not going to get forward if we, you know, continue to marginalize our own efforts. We should be leading these things, absolutely, but we need everyone to care about us. And so I think, you know, that moment where I have 18 students, only 3 of them are Samoan heritage, one Chamorro, and everyone else is white, but they're also having these transformative moments just because of how Samoan people are and how different Samoa is. It's just a reminder that there's actually people who want to work with us too. And so,
that's
you know,
an important point.
I think if we just keep our hearts open as well, then we'll be better off.
I want to go back to school, Evo.
I mean, I would never thought that the University of Oregon would have an exchange program to Samoa ever, but I mean, that's so powerful.
I couldn't, and when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, and all the programs happening at us, and now at Portland State University, just that now we have 3 of our public schools are going to be very prominent in Pacific Islander growth here in Oregon. So I love, that was just, I was watching, I was looking at all of the photos, and I was like, oh, to just have been a fly to see all of that, because I saw the students and I was like, just imagine the impact, like, yes, it is important for our Pacific Islander students to be a part of that, but also to open our hearts up to the other and
to the community.
Yeah, to the community. I mean, that's something, you know, with my Hawaii community, especially in spaces where like it's my Hawaiian language speakers or my Hawaiian language community. I'm often challenged with that. Like, why are you up there teaching, you know, our non-Hawaiian people or non-Pacific Islanders? I'm like, because if we don't teach them, then they will never understand.
Exactly.
You know, if we don't bring them into the right spaces to be informed, like imagine having informed tourists going to our places. It's so important. So it's always, but even for me growing up in Hawaii, our education system also did not teach us about Pacific Islander history. It wasn't until I decided to go back to Manoa, because I didn't know about the Pacific Islander studies at OSU and U of O. But it wasn't until I went back to Manoa when I was in my 30s that I had an understanding about the history with Micronesia and our Melanesian communities. We don't learn that in Hawaii. And there's such a there's animosity between the two communities. There's so much animosity at home, and I sitting in that class, or even when I was in a group with Jinya, you know, we did our Pacific Islander data modernization, and just being in those spaces with them to hear their stories, I felt horrible, because in Hawaii I'm like, why do we not learn about this? And you know, and now when I go home and I'm in spaces and I'm having those conversations with other Hawaii people, I'm arguing with them like, they can't go home. They don't have home. Like, they don't have a place to go. And I'm privileged, because if I wanted to move home, I can go move home. But they don't. And we just don't, we don't have to. So I lean on that too. Like, we did not get that education. And I hope Hawaii systems change that too. Especially if we're part of the Pacific, we should be doing more of that. But also the showing up part. I think that's also something that our families they're afraid of sometimes, to come into the systems, the school systems, or to the schools, because it can be overwhelming, especially for some of our families who maybe English isn't their strongest language, right? And then and the school system kind of just goes with it as if it's the norm, and it can't be anymore. So I love that there's a reminder to keep showing up. Like, it doesn't matter, show up. It doesn't matter if, you know, maybe in this moment you don't understand, but there's people, there's community organizations, there's so many partners out there who are here to support. And so we have to keep showing up, because if we don't show up, then somebody else is writing our narrative. Right. And I think that was the problem. So we have to but I just want to say mahalo to all of you folks for coming out. 3 very busy Pacific Islander leaders in Oregon, who continue to elevate this work. You know, I'm always excited. My kids are starting to navigate. You know, my oldest one is in college now, and then the next 2, and I always stay in Oregon. The schools here are so amazing. Not just stay with me, but just stay, because just the potential that's here in Oregon. And so mahalo to all of you folks. Mahalo for cultivating and fostering the next generation and our leaders, because when I get to work with SPDC, I always love being with the students there. I mean, Pacifica at OSU, I mean, every university should go, no, and love all the schools, but Pacifica's event at OSU is my heart. I cry when those flags walk in, like, to see the students, especially most of those students who are growing up here in Oregon, who never saw themselves in the schools that they went to see them carry the flag in and be that proud, like, it's monumental. So mahalo to all of you folks. Mahalo for your time. Mahalo for your work. And mahalo to all of you for joining us today for our 5th episode of KOKO Podcast. And we hope you join us at the next one. So aloha and mahalo.
Thank you.